Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film my review of the Book Naturalist Book Club pick for the month of January. So in January, the very first month of the year, we read The Comfort of Crows, A Backyard Year by Margaret Renkl. Now, this is the second book that we've picked for the Book Naturalist Book Club of Margaret Renkl. The first one we read of hers was Late Migrations, which we read a couple of years ago. That was a really lovely book, and this was an extremely lovely book. So I just loved every part of this. First of all, the cover is absolutely gorgeous, and then we'll get into the rest of the reasons why this is such a fabulous read. So Margaret Renkl is an author from the American South. She currently lives in Tennessee, I believe, and she writes about her experiences with nature, like in a way of like her observations, her interactions, as a person who just deeply loves and cares about the outdoor world. Not from a place of like scientific research necessarily, although some of that is mixed in here, but more just day-to-day observations of things she encounters in her own backyard. And she mixes that in her writing with personal stories. So this is her third book. She wrote Late Migrations, which I discussed already, and then she also wrote a book called Graceland, which I have not yet read, but I'm sure that I will at some point. She also writes for New York Magazine, I believe. New York Times. So she writes essays for the New York Times, and she is a middle-aged person. So she has been around for a while and has things to say about the state of our natural environment. So this book is truly a lovely object. I would highly recommend the physical copy if you can get your hands on it. It has these lovely illustrations at the start of each section. These are kind of like collage type artwork, and they were created by Margaret Renkl's brother. I think his name's Billy. It says in the back, yeah, Billy is the one that created these lovely, lovely pieces of art. I mean, they're just absolutely gorgeous, and they're so fun, and they go along with the different essays. And each essay is just a short essay for each week of the year, and she divides it up into the different seasons. So you start with, I think it starts with spring. Does it start with winter? No, I'm sorry. It starts with winter and goes through all of the seasons in order. One essay for each week of the year. And so they're very short, at the most they're 5 or 6 pages, but usually they're 2 or 3 pages, and they're just observations, and they're so lovely and so meditative, contemplative, however you say that word. And like I said, she mixes in her observations about what she sees in her own spaces, whether it's her backyard, at her house in the suburbs in Tennessee, or they spend some time up in a cabin in the mountains and what they see there. She's a bird lover, a bird watcher, but she's also just a keen observer of the nature around her. So just really beautiful and really thoughtful. She mixes in her musings about what it's like to have your family change over time. She was a mom, and her children have now grown up and moved out, and what that's like for her and her husband to be empty nesters. And she sort of ties that together with her observations about birds, because she's an avid bird watcher. So yeah, just absolutely lovely. I will read you a selection here, since I always like to do that. And I would say this selection is tied into my last video where I talked about my college work with vernal pools. And a lot of you commented on that particular aspect of the last video. So this section goes along with that particular topic of vernal pools. For much of the year, the pond, dried up and completely concealed beneath last fall's leaves, doesn't exist. The only sign of it is in the place on the forest floor where the leaves remain inexplicably damp. Other leaves dry out and blow about with every thermal that rises from below the bluff, but these leaves stay wet. In fall, they grow darker and damper still. One bright winter day, following a big rain or a heavy melting snow, you realize the leaves in the half-acre shallow are suddenly giving back the blue sky, and the sentinels of bare trees towering above them. From the nearby path, it looks as though someone has buried a large mirror in the sleeping woods and carelessly tried to hide it with old leaves. Then you notice that the mirror is growing. In winter, this pond can't rightly be called a pond, but the rains keep coming. Fog gathers and condenses, water drips from every cloud-drenched tree. The pond remains muddy at the margins, clotted with any wafting thing the winds can bring, but the water spreads out and deepens. Human beings have had no hand in making this pond. You can tell because it's not bounded by banks or populated by fish. Emerging from the layers of windfall, the water is black as volcanic glass, because the soil below it is richer and blacker than any soil I have ever seen. I know this from knowing the pond in dry seasons. I don't need to prove it to myself again now. I don't kick the leaves aside to inspect it. I don't so much as nudge it with my toe. This soil is precious. It must not be disturbed. In time, the pond will engulf the soil, spreading far beyond the margins of the gathering mud. As it spreads, it will become home to a vast number of wetland plants and small creatures that have spent all fall and winter buried in the soil of the ghost pond. Dormant crustacean eggs, the larvae of aquatic insects, sleeping salamanders, all will be brought to waking life again by the rain. And then an entire array of beautiful creatures will find one another and lay their eggs. This pond that is too transitory to support fish is the perfect nursery for amphibians whose eggs too often become someone else's food in other ponds and creeks. Spotted salamanders live underground, but soon they will climb to the surface to mate and lay eggs in this pool. When they get here, they may find that the marbled salamanders have arrived first. The mole salamanders will stay in the shallowest spots on the edges of the pond. They can live nowhere else on this mountain. As the pond fills, the wood frogs and the pickerel frogs will arrive, and the spring peepers. Their mating songs will turn the spring nights into symphonies. The toads, too, will come to lay their eggs. The pond that is not a pond will become an incubator for every salamander larva and tadpole on this bluff. So that is a very excellent description of a vernal pool and how a vernal pool operates and how important a vernal pool is. And she just has little gems like this throughout this book, talking about different kinds of habitats, different kinds of species, and tying it all together with her own personal life and her personal feelings about climate change and habitat loss and species loss and all of that kind of stuff. I just found it to be completely delightful and a really lovely read, and I can't wait to reread it. This is a 5-star read for me. So yeah, highly successful first book of the year for Book Naturalist Book Club. So I hope you had a chance to read The Comfort of Crows along with us. And then in February for Black History Month, we have 2 selections for you to choose from, or read both, as I will be. The first one is Black Faces, White Spaces, Reimagining the Relationship of African Americans to the Great Outdoors by Carolyn Finney. And so this one is talks about why African Americans are underrepresented in the fields, the natural fields, biology fields, any kinds of jobs or occupations that require you to work out in the wilderness. Why is that particular group of people excluded from those types of jobs? So very interested in that book. And then the second thing that we'll be picking up is A Darker Wilderness, Black Nature Writing from Soil to Stars, edited by Erin Sharkey. And this is a collection of different pieces of writing. And I think that this might be a mixture of nonfiction, fiction, and poetry. So I guess we'll see. I'm not for sure. Maybe it is all nonfiction, but I kind of think that there might be a mixture of stuff in here. But there are some familiar names in the table of contents, some folks that we've read in the past from Book Naturalist. Lorette Savoy is in here. Carolyn Finney is also in here. And I saw another one, Alexis Pauline Gums, who we read a year or so ago. So there's some familiar names in there. I'm very excited to pick this one up and see what this is all about. And also really think this cover is excellent. So that's what we'll be reading. That's what we'll be reading in February. I hope you did have a chance to pick this one up. And if you didn't, please do in the future pick it up. I think Margaret Renkl is just an excellent, excellent nature writer, and very perfect book for us to pick for the first month of this new year of Book Naturalist Club reading. I hope you're all doing well and finding some great books to read. I will talk to you later.